Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're plunging into one of life's most profound and, let's be honest, pretty unsettling truths. The terror of death. Something we all face, right? That quiet dread may be lurking beneath the surface, shaping us in ways we don't always acknowledge.
Absolutely, and that's exactly where Ernest Becker fits in. For this deep dive, we're unpacking his incredible Pulitzer Prize-winning book, The Denial of Death.
Right. The Minneapolis Tribune called it a brilliant, passionate synthesis of the human science. It sounds like foundational stuff.
Oh, it really is. It gives you this radical framework for understanding ourselves, our motivations.
So our mission today is to explore Becker's idea. He argues basically that our behavior, individually and collectively, is profoundly shaped by this fear of death.
Exactly. We're going to break down his main theory, which he builds around 4 key strands, he calls them.
Okay.
And hopefully reveal just how deep this goes, how it influences our relationships, our culture, search for...
Sounds like a big undertaking. Fascinating. So Becker doesn't exactly start gently, does he? He paints a picture of nature that's, pretty brutal.
No sugarcoating there. His first foundational idea is that the world, at its core, is terrifying.
Terrifying.
Yeah. And he argues this raw reality is the source of our deepest anxieties. He just rips away any romantic notions. Nature as a brutal bitch, red in tooth and claw. He talks about organisms tearing others apart with teeth of all types, incorporating their essence, and then excreting with foul stench and gases the residue.
Okay, so not Wordsworth.
Not even close. It forces you to confront your own vulnerability, the kind of raw deal of existence.
So if that's the terrifying backdrop, what's driving us? Strand 2, you said. There's a biological need to control this anxiety.
Exactly. He argues the fundamental human motivation, like beneath everything else, is this biological drive to manage and, deny the terror of death.
Even if we don't realize it.
Especially if you don't realize it. That primal fear, William James called it the worm at the core of our happiness. It's pushing so much of what you do. Self-preservation taken to an existential level.
Is this something we learn, this fear, or are we just born with it?
It's a really key question. Some theories say it's learned, but Becker leans towards thinkers like Zilborg, who argued it's innate, part of our self-preservation instinct.
Innate.
It's always there, but usually properly repressed. We exert this constant psychological effort, keep the lid on,
Because if we didn't...
It'd be paralyzing, probably. Hard to get out of bed.
And this even affects kids, right? Before they even really get what death is. How does that work?
Yeah, it's fascinating. Children don't really grasp death conceptually until, 3 to 5, maybe?
Right.
But their world is still full of terror. Think about it. Extreme dependence, this confusing mix of feeling helpless and also having... magical omnipotence. Yeah, like believing their thoughts can directly change reality. So when things go wrong or they feel angry, they can't always separate that feeling from actually causing harm. It's confusing and scary.
Leads to nightmares, phobias.
Yeah, exactly. They're grappling with helplessness, the unknown, this kind of fuzzy but terrifying reality.
So if we're constantly trying to keep this lid on, what does that do to us?
Yeah.
Our personalities. Becker's take on character is pretty provocative.
It really is. He basically says human character itself is a neurotic defense against despair.
Wow. So who I think I am is a defense.
Justly, yeah. Constructed to shield you from the overwhelming truth. He borrows from Ortega y Gasset. Our ideas, our beliefs, they're like trenches for the defense of our existence. Yeah, or a curtain of fantasy hiding a chaotic reality. And it's not like conscious scheming. It's an ancient organismic need to protect yourself from just too much reality.
That's heavy. If our character is a kind of self-deception, what does that imply about sanity?
Well, it leads straight to Pascal's rather chilling. Men are so necessarily mad that not to be mad would amount to another form of madness.
So being sane is actually a form of madness.
In Becker's view, yeah.
Yeah.
Because sanity requires ignoring the fundamental, terrifying dilemma of being human.
The dilemma being?
Our dualism. You have this splendid, unique consciousness, meaning seeking, but you're also just an animal fated to return to the ground, to blindly and dumbly, to rot and disappear forever. It's an impossible situation, he said. Our madness, our character defense are just how we cope.
Okay, so if we're all engaged in this necessary madness, this constant anxiety management, the core task becomes heroic, you mentioned.
Exactly. It connects back to that second strand. The core human job is to become heroic, to somehow transcend death.
Not literally like superhero.
No. It's about participating in something of lasting worth, conquer an empire, build a temple, write a book, establish a family, accumulate a fortune, further progress, all these things.
Anything that feels like it makes a mark, that lasts beyond you.
Precisely. It's all a quest for a kind of immortality, a way to make your life count against that backdrop of, oblivion.
Okay, and this is where it gets really interesting for me. If we're all on this heroic quest, Becker says something pretty startling about culture itself, that every culture is covertly religious, even ones that claim not to be.
Right. This is a huge insight. He argues every society, whether it's, say, Soviet Russia back then, or modern scientific rationalism, or our consumer culture, functions like a religion.
How so?
It provides an intricate symbolic system. It acts as a living myth of the significance of human life, a defiant creation of meaning.
A myth. Okay.
It gives you this hopeful belief that what you're doing makes you count for more than any other animal. So even if a society throws out traditional gods, it creates new progress, the market, the nation, science itself, to fill that same fundamental need for meaning and, immortality.
That makes a disturbing amount of sense. Which leads us to the third strand, conflicts between cultures. Becker says these are basically battles between immortality projects, holy wars.
Exactly. Not just about land or oil or politics, though those are obviously facts. He suggests that at a deeper level, corporations, nations, ideologies are driven by unconscious motives.
Like the Vietnam War example, not just about economics.
Yeah, he proposed it was less about direct economic interest and more about this overwhelming need, atheistic communism, to basically prove that one version of lasting worth, one immortality project, was superior. It becomes my gods against your gods.
A clash of ultimate meanings.
That's the idea.
Which brings us to the fourth strand, maybe the most radical, that our heroic projects, especially the ones aimed at destroying evil, end up creating more evil.
It's a deeply troubling paradox. He argues human conflicts are these life and death struggles, my gods against your god. But the root of the evil we cause isn't like our base animal nature.
No, then what?
It's our human tendency to project our own shadow side, our feelings of inadequacy, self-hate, fear, hostility onto an end. We label them evil to purify it.
So war becomes a kind of ritual purification.
A social ritual for purification. The enemy gets assigned the role. Dirty, dangerous, atheistic, whatever fits the bill.
And he points to examples like Dachau, My Lai, Bosnia, Rwanda.
Grim examples, yes. Grim testimony to this universal need for a scapegoat.
A scapegoat.
Someone to carry all the darkness we can't face in ourselves. Becker calls it a death potlatch, a ritual destruction where the more blood the better is spilled for the sacred cause, which is ultimately about validating our own group's claim to immortality and meaning.
Chilling. And this loops back to that idea of mad, refusing to see this pattern, this vital lie we live by. That refusal is costly.
Immensely costly. He insists man lives by lying to himself and about his world, and that character is a vital lie. Our whole personality is structured around this need to repress globally, to push down the terrifying, just to maintain a warm sense of inner value.
Like an armor.
Exactly, an armor made of illusion. And he suggests, that resistance to things like psychoanalysis often comes from not wanting to curtain, not wanting to admit the lie.
So this armor, this vital lie, it seems necessary but also limiting. Kim has said something like, for anyone who is alone, without God and without a master, the weight of days is dreadful. Hence, one must choose a master. Becker calls this a nexus of unfreedom.
Yeah, it's this idea that we're not really free because we're constantly seeking external anchors to manage that existential dread. We choose a master, a belief, a leader, a cause, even a relationship to give us structure and meaning, to shield us from that dreadful weight.
Which highlights our dependence.
Deep. And it connects to Freud's idea of transference.
All right, transferring feelings from childhood onto people now.
Exactly. Unconsciously taking feelings you had towards, say, your parents' needs for protection, idealization, maybe even fear, and plastering them onto others. Teachers, bosses, charismatic figures.
Leads to that blind belief and uncritical obedience he talks about.
That's often the result. You're not seeing the person clearly. You're seeing them through the lens of these projections.
And this applies really strongly to leaders, doesn't it? Freud's horde animals led by a chief. How does childhood fit into the power of leaders and group sadism?
It fits perfectly. The leader becomes this powerful, almost magical figure. Surrendering your will to them taps into that longing for being hypnotized, that desire to return to the safety of childhood, the magical protection, the oceanic feeling of war.
Okay.
But the flip side is that leaders can also mission implicitly or explicitly for followers, express forbidden things individuals might hold back alone. The group feels free. Hence Freud's terrifying sadism.
And individuals can then kind of wash their hands of responsibility. I was just following orders.
Precisely. They feel like temporary victims of the leader's command, reserving the feeling that these commands are alien to them. It allows for a feeling of guiltlessness.
The Manson family example he uses is pretty stark here.
It's a terrifying illustration, yeah. Becker would say they weren't inhuman monsters, but people who exaggerated the disposition present in us all. They found a cheap heroism by merging with Manson's identity, acting through his image.
Cheap heroism?
Yeah.
Wow. And Becker calls transference a kind of fetish control. That sounds complex. What's he getting at?
It sounds technical, but the idea is kind of simple. We narrow our focus almost obsessively onto one thing, a person, an idea, maybe even, as Saz suggested, our own body or illness as the transference object, to feel some control, to get a little purchase on our fate, because the vastness of reality, the real problem of death, is just too overwhelming. So you fetishize something smaller, more manageable, as the source of your security or power. It's like a rebellion against reality, clinging to immaturity.
And Otto Rank connected this to a fear of life itself, didn't? Seeking shelter, but then fearing the loss of that shelter. Transference terror.
Yes, Rank's insight was crucial. We run towards these powerful figures or ideas for safety, but then we become terrified of losing them because they've taken on this huge, larger-than-life-size significance. They represent our control over life and death.
So when that immortality figure dies,
it triggers this profound state of shock, this massive neurotic vaudeville of despair. Rank suggested all the intense grief at funerals isn't just for the deceased, it's fundamentally for oneself, for the shattering of that vital illusion, the loss of your perceived control over mortality. Your locus of power can himself die.
So we're stuck in this fundamental bind, this ontological dilemma, big words, but basically a conflict in our being.
Yeah, Becker really emphasizes this core ambivalence. On one hand, you have this desire to merge, to belong to something larger, the cosmic process, agape, sort of universal belonging.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you have this powerful urge to be unique, stand out, to shine. That's Eros, the individual drive.
And these are in conflict.
Constantly. It creates this natural guilt, this tortured dissatisfaction with yourself. You want to merge and you want to be special. You're always trying to be bigger and better than one really is, but you keep bumping up against your own.
Which makes sense why, especially today, people pour so much energy into romantic love as a path to heroism.
Absolutely. It becomes the modern arena for transcend. Spirituality gets brought down to this earth and given form in another individual.
The cosmology of two.
Right. Love becomes this intense transference, beatification. You basically deify your partner. They become the source of all meaning, your personal solution to the death.
It usually doesn't work out quite, does it? Why can't relationships bear that burden of godhood?
Because, well, people are people. Your idealized partner inevitably shows their earthly decay and imperfect, have bad days, they have flaws, they're mortal.
And that shatters the illusion.
It shatters the illusion, and because your sense of worth and immortality was invested in them, their imperfection diminished. Becker even suggests that sometimes lashing out the urge to attack loved ones can be this twisted creative act to bring the idealized image crashing down, to reclaim your own freedom from that impossible.
Oof. Okay, what about artists? Creativity seems like another route to immortality.
It is, definitely, a powerful means of self-glorification. But Becker points out it's also ephemeral, potentially meaningless, without some kind of external validation or framework.
And Rank saw a link between art and psychosis.
Yeah, an intimate relationship.
Yeah.
He saw both the artist and the person experiencing psychosis as potentially being trapped by their own fabric, desperately trying to assert their specialness, their unique meaning against the void. The creative act is profound, but it's still a symbolic immortality, fragile on its own.
So, if love and art have these built-in limitations, where does that leave modern people? Becker talks about neurosis being a huge problem. Why?
He ties it to the disappearance of convincing dramas of heroic apotheosis. Basically, we lack the grand, universally accepted cultural narratives, religious or otherwise, that used to offer clear paths to feeling heroic.
So neurosis is, what, failing to find a convincing story?
It's trouble living with the truth of existence, yeah. It's this constant, difficult negotiation with illusions because the readily available ones don't feel convincing enough. He mentions Pinel observing neurotics during the French Revolution who suddenly got better.
Why?
Because the revolution provided a ready-made drama of self-transcending act, heroic identity. It implies that maybe, for many, life requires strong bear.
And in our time, psychology itself often steps into that gap as a kind of therapeutic religion.
That's exactly his point. Without those traditional worldviews, therapists can become guru figures. Through the steady and quiet power of transference, they offer a promising
immortality and life-enhancing power in a symbolic sense, cultivating an image, sometimes unintentionally, of almost halo-like infallibility. Therapy becomes a modern quest for meaning, salvation, a way to manage the terror.
But ultimately, Becker brings us back down to earth, doesn't he? There's no way to transcend the limits of the human condition. No escape.
That's his sobering conclusion. All the grand prophecies of a new man, a life totally free from repression, like those envisioned by thinkers such as Norman O. Brown or Marcuse, he saw them as mere fancy.
He quotes Andre Malraux.
Yeah, that devastating line.
Yeah.
It takes 60 years of incredible suffering and effort to make such an individual, and then he is good only for dying.
Yeah.
Even at the peak of self-awareness and development, you still confront the real despair of the human condition. You still see the world unfiltered as devastating and terrifying.
So after all that, what's the takeaway? This deep dive really hammers home how much our awareness of death, everything. It drives our personal anxieties, our cultural creation, our conflict, our deepest desires for love and meaning. It's the engine humming beneath it all, often completely unconscious.
So Becker leaves us in a tough spot. If reality is the misery, as he suggests, and our whole character is this neurotic shield against despair, what does that mean for living a good life?
That's the provocative question. What kinds of courageous what life-enhancing are actually necessary? Can we function without?
And what would it mean for you, listening right now, to genuinely try and face that grotesque reality Becker described, your place in it?
Acknowledging that maybe even your most cherished belief might be, in some sense, part of a magnificent vaudeville show you put on to distract yourself from the inevitable. It's a lot to think about.